The fallout from Labor's landslide election win has been almost as extraordinary as the result itself. The leadership of the Liberals, Nationals and Greens are all now in play, their direction up in the air. It hasn't been entirely smooth sailing for Labor either, with two cabinet ministers pushed out by the factions. One of them, Ed Husic, joins me this morning. I'm David Spears. Welcome to Insiders. Labor's win just keeps getting bigger. It's climbed to a whopping 92 seats and is expected to go even higher as counting continues. The greatly expanded caucus gathered on Friday. There was much celebration, but also some alarm after a brutal internal power play saw two ministers, Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus, forced off the front bench. The flex of factional muscle stunned many in Labor and earned a stinging rebuke from Paul Keating. But it's the losing parties facing a deeper crisis. Tensions have flared between the Nationals and Liberals after Jacinta Nampijinpa Price defected from one to the other. Both parties are facing uncertainty over their leadership and direction. So too are the Greens after Adam Bandt lost his seat.
Beautiful Canberra day.
It's back to work this morning for Anthony Albanese.
After Labor's landslide election victory.
You ready? Yep. My objective was forming a majority government. That's what we did.
After looming large over our federal election, Donald Trump has congratulated Anthony Albanese on his win.
I had a very warm and positive conversation with President Trump.
I can only say that he's been very, very nice to me, very respectful to me.
We talked about AUKUS and tariffs.
I have no idea who the other person is that ran against him.
And I thank him for reaching out.
As Liberals begin their post-mortem,
questions are also mounting over the detail, direction and future of the party.
Look, it was a disaster.
Our campaign headquarters didn't read the tea leaves.
We didn't convince Australians that they could change to us.
we got it wrong.
The Liberal Party rebuilds from here.
The Liberal Party is trying to stabilise after Saturday's defeat by finding new leaders from the surviving members of the coalition.
The Liberal leadership is now a two-horse race between Sussan Lee and Angus Taylor.
That I am the right person to lead the party forward at this time.
I know what it takes to lead, to unify and to deliver.
Jacinta Nampijinpa Price defecting from the Nationals party room.
Possibly to run on a leadership ticket with Angus Taylor.
The Liberal party room is my natural home.
Not the only party in search of a new leader.
Thank you for the last 15 years.
And Adam Bandt, the Greens leader, will lose the seat of Melbourne.
One Nation and Liberal preferences will get Labor over the line.
Labor MPs have arrived in Canberra today to begin factional discussions over ministry position.
Are you expecting a big shake-up?
It's a great morning.
Not going to make a comment, thanks.
Look, we've got a process underway.
I'm not going to talk about portfolios.
I'm just happy to be here.
No individual is greater than the collective.
Ministers Mark Dreyfus and Ed Husic will lose their front bench positions.
I am used to politics having its ups and downs.
Australia's Prime Minister.
Room.
My guest this morning is Ed Husic, the Minister for Industry and Science, just dropped from the front bench by the factions. First, let's check what's making news. India and Pakistan are both accusing each other of violating a ceasefire just hours after the US negotiated agreement was struck. Both sides say they're acting appropriately and with restraint. It follows 4 days of strikes and counterstrikes between the nuclear-armed neighbours. European leaders have joined the Ukrainian president in Kyiv, calling on Russia to agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. The group spoke with US President Donald Trump on the phone, who has also indicated support for a ceasefire. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has also joined calls for Russia to agree to this ceasefire. Back here, after Sussan Lee released a series of videos yesterday making her pitch for the leadership, her rival Angus Taylor has just posted on social media a video of himself and Jacinta Nampijinpa Price announcing the senator will run as deputy leader. The Taylor-Price joint ticket is promising to rebuild and renew the party.
And I think we have such passion for this country, for our party and for the coalition as a whole. That's what I think Australians need to understand, that we're a team that's prepared to get out there and fight.
No, absolutely right, and you've been a great inspiration to me. But we've got to regroup, rebuild and get it back into the fight.
Well, there is enormous drama and division going on in the coalition. We'll come to all of that. We're going to start, though, with Labor, given it will take up nearly 2/3 of the lower house, the way things are going. It's now confident of holding the seat of Bean in Canberra, which means it won't have lost a single seat. But the victory celebrations have been marred by the jarring move to dump Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus. This was a power play driven by Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. It stunned some of his cabinet colleagues who've called it unnecessary, brutal and hopelessly managed. As one long-serving MP noted, in Labor, you forgive but never forget. Let's see what the panel makes of it. We're joined by Phil Curry, Melissa Clark and Peter Harcher. Very good morning to all of you.
Morning, Dave.
What a week, a lot to get through. Let's start with Labor, though. Carving up the spoils of victory, Phil, has left some blood on the floor. For those wondering, why and how were Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus dropped?
Well, just for the viewers who aren't familiar with the factional system, so there's 30 frontbench positions, 20 in Cabinet, 10 in the outer ministry, and who fills those positions is decided by the factions, the right and the left, based on their representation. So this time it's 15 each. So in the case of Ed, the Victorian right was entitled to another spot because of the change in the makeup, and Ed's New South Wales right faction had one too many, so someone had to give, and that was the sort of brutal calculation behind that. As for Dreyfus, there was actually no imperative because he belongs to the Victorian right and they were entitled to another spot. They decided to get rid of Dreyfus and bring in two new people, one for Ed and one for Dreyfus. And that's sort of the brutal maths behind it, if you like, without going into reasons. But I guess at least Husic, can at least console himself that there's a numerical justification, even if I'm sure he's going to challenge that. But with Dreyfus, look, had he known, he wouldn't have run again. Yeah, there was talk about him not going around last time. Remember, Anthony Albanese said in the middle of last year, any minister's not going around again, let me know so I can do a reshuffle. And we saw Brendan O'Connor and Linda Burney step aside, but Mark made it plain he wanted to go again. So he returned to work this week fully thinking he was going to be Attorney General for 3 more years.
He wouldn't have run if he'd known.
No way. And I suspect there'll be a by-election in his seat of Isaac's.
You wouldn't blame him.
No. Why would you hang around? He's 68 and he's Barry backbencher.
Yeah, and Mel, look, the way this was done is also drawing a lot of criticism. I mean, Mark Dreyfus apparently was texting and calling Richard Marles, the faction leader in Victoria for the right, and didn't get any reply until a phone call 8:30 that night to tell him he was gone. A lot of people are saying this is very poor treatment of someone who's done nothing wrong.
Yeah, and it's certainly having reverberations within the party and outside the party, and those in the party also know about the reverberations outside the party, right? This was meant to be a week of crowning glory from an election result that was extraordinary for the ALP, and the first action within the party has been to remind the public of the ruthless lack of meritocracy that goes into selecting who is going to be cabinet ministers and who is going to be running the country. It certainly sours the victory for the Labor Party. Internally, it will cause some degree of concern for those who don't want to find themselves in the future in positions, should they be so lucky as Mark Dreyfus, to realise how ruthlessly they can go. But for most of the people who are winning their seats and coming into the ALP caucus, they well know this is the reality, and they've already made that reconciliation of the role of the factions here before they even get into Parliament.
I mean, but even those who know how the factions work very well are still alarmed at this. Paul Keating, of course, the former Prime Minister, he had a crack at Richard Marles particularly, who I don't think he rates terribly highly, but also the Prime Minister for not intervening on this. I mean, take a look at some of what Paul Keating said. This was a showing of poor judgment, unfairness and diminished respect for the contribution of others. Peter, could and should the Prime Minister have stopped this happening?
Well, the last Prime Minister to challenge the factional system was Kevin Rudd.
And that didn't work out very well for him because the factions from that moment on just waited for their opportunity to destroy him, which they did with Julia Gillard's connivance, of course. And there is a certain harsh reality to this. These blokes got these jobs because of the factional system. It's, you know, factions are machines for mutual self-protection and self-promotion. So they live by the faction, they die by the faction. And it was the factions that nominated who was going to get the chop. Ed Husic was chosen to go by his New South Wales Right faction, Dreyfus by Richard Marles and the Victorian Right faction. It wasn't the reality of the factions at work here. What upset the people involved, and I think many in the party and Labor supporters, was the brutality of it, was the harshness of it. You've just run through how Mark Dreyfus was trying to get in touch with Richard Marles for days. Marles couldn't find the time to talk to him until he rang him on Wednesday to tell him he was gone. Similarly, there were efforts, I think, with Ed Husic to try to get some sort of management, some sort of conciliation or meeting between the Victorians and the New South Wales people and the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister refused to be involved. He didn't want to get involved in either case and stayed above it very deliberately.
Is the argument there, Mel, that this is, you know, I guess to defend the approach that they have, the democratic way that the caucus works, where it's not the king at the top picking who's going to be on the front bench, everybody does get a say through the organisation of these factions who is going to be elevated to the top.
It's a system that has provided a level of stability at many, many times. So you can certainly argue that this allows for a fair and more reflective representation in caucus. But I think it's very clear that the Prime Minister has let the factions do the dirty work in both cases to get a factional alignment and to get generational change. It's now not a problem that he had to do personally and get his hands bloodied by. He's let the factions do that. But I think he is also quite constrained by the fact that the power balance within the party, not just the parliamentary party, but I mean within the ALP itself, is shifting. He is a Prime Minister from the New South Wales left. It is the Victorian right that has great strength behind the scenes. I do think there's a limitation in the reality of the factional system about what the Prime Minister could have done.
Look, at the end of the day, we've got to remember this is in the category of good problems to have, you know, what Labor's compared to what the other mob's going through. But I think that, and Labor is a tribe, right? And we often forget it's a tribe. It's a very loyal tribe. And, you know, sort of circulating amongst everyone on what day was it? They were all back for their caucus meeting Friday. You know, everyone was still feeling, you know, as distasteful as some found these events. There was a sense of closing ranks around the rules and the tribal structures and respecting them. I think the problem is, if there is a lingering problem, I don't see why Marles became such a visible face of the execution. This is why you have faceless men who run the factions. They do this stuff. The fact that Marles was the executor here is probably why we're talking about it more than we otherwise would be, because you've got the Deputy Prime Minister bulleting his cabinet colleagues visibly, and I think that's where, you know, so people are saying he's now got a target on his back.
And I want to show people for what. Here are the new faces that do come in. On the left, you've got Tim Ayres and Jess Walsh, and the left have done this a lot more smoothly. They operate a bit differently. They choose nationally who's going to be on the front bench.
Well, they had vacancies.
And they had vacancies, correct, to fill, so not so much drama on the left. And then on the right, Sam Ray and Dan Molino, both from Victoria. And it's Sam Ray in particular who's copping a lot of focus here as a factional operative, very close to Richard Marles. What's he done to deserve this promotion, to knock off?
Well, he's been around for 3 years, right? He's been in Parliament 3 years or so. He's the factional operative for the right, the Victorian right. He's Marles's guy, and he was sort of pivotal with his deal. So, but you know, that's what I mean. Mel's saying it's not always about merit.
I mean, you need generational change from time to time.
And they do need that, and that is a problem. I mean, you have a ministry that's largely unchanged from the Gillard years, and they do need both, and you've got so much pressure now building underneath. It's a bit like a footy team. If you don't start moving on the older players, you get problems.
But he's not been a committee chair or the sort of things that normally you are before
Was Molino, yes. Molino's an economics professor. He's very well regarded. They need heft in their economic team. I suspect he'll be the assistant treasurer. In the New South Wales, right, you've got Andrew Charlton, who's sort of knocking on the door for promotion similar to Molino.
Still can't get one, yeah.
But he may get parliamentary secretary or something like that. But these are the problems. You do need to start getting people up.
But all of this, you know, it has marred what is an otherwise great moment of celebration for Labor, and we probably should, given we've seen the seat count continue through the week, just reflect on where things have settled for Labor, because this really is, I mean, it's only got bigger and bigger as the week's gone on, Peter.
Yes, it's a very impressive performance, and one of the reasons it's so impressive is that they still managed to get only a fairly modest, they increased their primary share of the vote, but it's still pretty modest, 34 and a bit percent, just over a third of the electorate, and yet they've got this huge number of seats in the House. And that speaks to, first of all, the failure of the coalition to appeal to voters. But second, it's a compliment and evidence of the cunning of the Labor campaign, where they had a two-level campaign. It was a bifurcated campaign where on the national level, there were the big messages that everybody saw across the whole country. But then there were 150 different seat campaigns, which Albanese and the party secretary, Paul Erickson, had spent 6 years planning how to have a specific tailored campaign seat by seat.
In one part of Tasmania versus Peter Dutton.
Versus inner city Melbourne versus Dixon in Brisbane.
Yeah,
and it was very successful.
Backing Peter's point, in 2013 when Tony Abbott won 90 seats, he had 46% of the primary vote. Albanese is going to win more seats than that with 34% of the primary vote. So it shows how as point Peter's making about it's about harvesting preferences now.
And a lot of this also comes down to a triumph of organisation from the ALP. There is no other political outfit in this country that has the resources, the coordination, the institutional knowledge, the grassroots work that is in any way comparable to what the ALP has.
And in terms of this enormous political capital that the Prime Minister now has, I think all the signals we've seen this week from him are that he's going to spend that very carefully. You know, this no overreaching the mandate. Those who might expect this as a great opportunity to do some big stuff, he's going to be cautious, isn't he, Peter?
Well, yes, he is. He's going to spend the first half of his term concentrating, I think, on delivering all the promises that they've made. And they've made a lot of promises, and some of them are tricky problems to fix. But yes, he's going to continue in a fairly cautious mode. It will take crises to bring drastic action from him. Now, the key relationship, I think, will be between the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. I think Jim Chalmers would like to, I mean, he's got the Productivity Commission producing reports on 5 different areas where he should and could act to improve productivity, which is the only way you get living standards up in the long run. And now he'll need Prime Ministerial licence to act on that. Will Albanese give him licence? As we know from the Howard Costello relationship, the Hawke-Keating relationship, that can be a very tense relationship at the centre of the government. How will they resolve that? And will Albanese give Chalmers the licence to do what the country needs? This, I think, is the biggest question. If I can just add a thought about Richard Marles, I think the country would love to see Richard Marles implementing defence policy, getting the budget and the capability for our defence forces as effectively as he's done this very energetic, factional, dirty work.
All right. Well, on that note, time to talk to the outgoing Industry Minister, Ed Husic. And to take us there, here was GP and local Muslim community leader Jamal Rifi on the decision to drop him from Cabinet.
We safeguarded those hard-working Labor ministers and Labor candidates in southwestern Sydney and also in Melbourne and across the state. For us to be rewarded for our hard work, dumping Ed Husic, the Prime Minister need to reflect on what sort of message he sent to all these people who worked very hard in southwestern Sydney.
Ed Husic, thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning.
I should note that you agreed to this interview before your ministerial fate was sealed, so we do appreciate you sticking to that commitment.
Thank you for that, and happy Mother's Day, Bob.
Happy Mother's Day indeed. I neglected to mention that to all the mums out there, including my own, so I'm glad you prompted me on that. Look, I wanted to start with when you were sworn in 3 years ago to the ministry, you actually famously were the first to use a Quran for the swearing-in ceremony. And you said at the time it sent a signal to the broader community that people from different backgrounds, different faiths, can have a role to play in building a better country. What signal does the decision to drop you from the ministry send?
I think for me personally, having the chance to be elected first as a son of immigrants, a child of migrants, meant a great deal to me personally. I never thought that would happen. I certainly think my parents never thought that either, so it was a great opportunity. And then to be able to take part in a cabinet meant a great deal. You can't celebrate diversity and then expect it to sit in a corner silent. Like, you need to speak up when you bring those different views to either a cabinet table or a caucus. I certainly took the view you need to speak up for the communities that you care about. I certainly tried to help us navigate wretchedly difficult issues, such as what we're seeing has unfolded in Gaza post the horrors of October 7. I don't think I could ever stay silent in the face of innocent civilians being slaughtered in their tens of thousands and being starved out of Gaza. So I tried to find the way to be able to speak at the cabinet table and speak elsewhere, to be able to make sure that communities we represent know that their voices are heard. And importantly, if I can end on this point, there are a lot of people that seeing things on their TV screens, seeing those horrors, turning to their political representatives, and they're not asking for the lines of the day, they're asking for a statement of values, what you believe in, what you'll stand up for, and I think that's an important obligation to fulfil.
Do you think, in what you're saying there, do you think part of the reason why you've been dropped is because you've been more outspoken on those issues?
I think I fulfilled my role not just as a cabinet minister, but as a caucus member. You should have the ability to speak up on the issues that you believe in. You should have the ability to question. It builds a stronger, not a weaker party to do so. I think, we can see at the extremes what happens when people feel like they can't speak up. I mean, I would hate us to think we get to a situation like Trump Republicans who know something's wrong and don't speak. I'm not saying that's the case here, but there is a role, a value in questioning and speaking up.
But do you think this has cost you?
I think it's been a factor in there. Would I do things differently? I don't think so. We've probably established that Balkan charm has a shelf life of 3 years. But
so you're saying that as a factor, being more of an agitator on some of these issues has played a role in your demise from the ministry?
Well, I'd put it this way: if you, most, particularly in the New South Wales right, sort of students of history with long memories, there have been times where in previous governments there's been very vigorous debate. We had a government that went for 5 terms. We've had people in senior roles in this government that did the same thing as I did, questioned, and I don't think that's an unhealthy thing. And I certainly don't want one of the lessons out of this that you can't question, because I think there's value in doing it.
But you're saying Labor's less tolerant of that debate these days?
I don't think we can afford to be less tolerant.
Was your experience that there was little tolerance for that sort of open debate?
I think there were times where it had to be encouraged, and I think in particular on issues like Gaza, there needed to be faith in Muslim communities around the country that their voice was being heard. That was really important. A lot of communities, members of Muslim communities, stayed with the government through this election, and I would hate to think that they've felt abandoned after that, and that there isn't a role to play for hearing their voices.
So why do you think you were dropped? If that was a factor, what about the way the factions operate, the raw numbers of it that we were just discussing earlier? Do you accept that the New South Wales right faction, of which you're a member, did have to lose someone?
I think it's important to emphasise factions play a really important role in managing merit, moderating ambition, and providing an orderly transition for renewal, right? So that's very important. And I'm not speaking that way just off the cuff. I mean, my experience back in 2019 is I could have easily prevailed in that ballot. I took the view it was untenable to have a former Premier sitting on the backbench. We needed to do what was good for the collective, right? I live my values. I think it's important to say you sometimes have to make a decision that's good for the collective, and I live my values.
And you're saying your colleagues on this occasion did not live their values?
Well, I think, look, the difficult issue here is that we've had sort of barefaced ambition and a Deputy Prime Minister wield a factional club to reshape the ministry. I think when people look at a Deputy Prime Minister, they expect to see a statesman, not a factional assassin.
There's some strong words. You're saying Richard Marles has put his own ambition to boost his numbers ahead of the good of the party and the government.
Well, I think a lot of people would draw that conclusion, right? And I think he needed to exercise leadership. He's part of the leadership group. He needs to be able to show that we've got to be able to manage these things in an orderly way. I've tried to show that in times past. I think he can show that. And I really feel for, if I can say, we've had, it's been a bit of a roller coaster week. I've felt for people like Dave Smith, who's finally edging ahead in Bean. Great to see. Lisa Chester's back. Tremendous outpouring of support for me from across factions and across the political divide, which has been terrific. And I feel for supporters of our party who went from the high of a Saturday and a terrific and tremendous win to the lows of factional grubbiness. And I just feel like it's been a distraction at the start of what will be a successful second term.
And do you primarily blame Richard Marles for that?
I think Richard has a lot, there will be a lot of questions put to Richard about his role, and that's something that he will have to answer and account for.
You blame him?
Well, I think I've been pretty clear in my last answer.
In terms of your own faction, though, if you had to lose someone, why was it you and not Tony Burke, Chris Bowen or Jason Clare?
I think I didn't want to. I made the decision ultimately we would have had to have taken it to a national right ballot. The way it was all managed was all very last minute. You've heard the stories about Mark trying to get in contact with Richard. These things were left, as I said, last minute, and I think there was a deliberateness about all that. I wasn't going to put my colleagues through that, and I did, again, what I thought was the right thing to do.
So you're saying there was no ballot in the right faction in New South Wales. You offered to go?
Correct, because I did not want to put my colleagues through a national ballot. And again, I just did it in the interests of stability.
But coming back to your earlier point about the need to maintain some diversity in the front bench, shouldn't some of your New South Wales right colleagues have gone, well, hang on, in the interests of preserving that diversity, Ed Husic should stay, I should go?
Look, I think, what is done is done, right? We've got to be able to move ahead, but I think we've got to learn a few lessons out of this in particular. I think I thought it was also especially disrespectful of the Deputy Prime Minister to put the Prime Minister in a terrible place where he was being asked to intervene. I didn't think that was right either. The PM had great authority coming out of the election. I think if he'd exercised it in a way that provided for stability and a strong team that had been there and could go forward, no one would have quibbled about that.
So I was going to ask you about the role of the Prime Minister. Do you think he should have intervened or not?
Well, of course, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here with false modesty, of course. And when you see, you hear him rattle off names of the number of people that would be retained or retaining ministerial spots. I'm sure I wasn't the only minister wanting to be in that list. And again, like if he'd exercised that authority, I don't think anyone would have quibbled. I just think, we've obviously got to be able to avoid these type of episodes. I think the factional grubbiness, there are better ways. Factional mechanics do help manage merit and moderate ambition, and that's when they work well. We've seen it at its best previously. We saw it at its worst this week.
On the role of the Prime Minister, though, obviously you would have liked him to intervene. Did you call him? Did you speak?
No, I didn't. We did speak yesterday. He rang me yesterday and we're catching up on Monday. And I look forward to that being a constructive discussion that talks about the role that I can keep playing as well, and being able to speak up on the things that I think are important and that I care about and that I represent people in the community.
Did he explain to you why he didn't intervene?
I was a very, very quick call, and we'll no doubt chat about things on Monday.
Did he thank you for your service?
Again, it was a quick call.
He didn't thank you?
Quick call.
Find that a little strange.
Oh, well, again, you know, you can canvass a lot of issues, but it was, you know, I no doubt we'll talk about it on Monday.
Okay. Well, in terms of your future then, did he suggest you'd be an assistant minister or any sort of role ongoing or not?
Oh, no, we didn't. Again, very brief discussion, and we didn't canvass that. So, you know, from my perspective, I think it was, I still think I've got a contribution to make, and I want to do so. I was reminded that someone had once said that, you know, success isn't final, failure isn't fatal, and the courage to continue is what matters. And here I am, a Labor MP, quoting Churchill on Insiders. That's where we've got to, but yeah.
You're staying in the Labor Party though?
Indeed.
Okay.
The party has been, can I just say, the party has given me great opportunity. And its faith in me, particularly with my faith, has allowed me in part to make history and break records. I've been attracted to it because of the capacity to question and challenge status quo and challenge conservatism. It provides hope, aspiration for others. I want to be part of that process still.
And in terms of challenging, as a backbencher, you will have more freedom to speak up on issues. You've got a smile on your face already. Here they come.
I'm always happy talking with you, David.
You are. Gaza, we talked about that before. I mean, we're now into, 3 months of Israel's blockade of Gaza. It's doing this, it says, because it hopes Hamas will release the remaining hostages. But doctors in Gaza, for example, are pointing out it's the most vulnerable there who are suffering through this humanitarian blockade. What's your view on what needs to happen there?
From day one, you know, after the horrors of October 7, I emphasised we needed to acknowledge humanity for what Israelis suffered on October 7, and then, you know, what innocent civilians suffered, Palestinians thereafter, slaughtered in their tens of thousands. We've seen just in the past week or so, the Israeli parliament say it wants to annex Gaza, and effectively that is a form of ethnic cleansing. We've seen the starvation of its people through the failure to provide humanitarian assistance. We do need to keep the focus on there and also ensure that there are voices on the international stage, of which we should continue to be one, that stress that innocent people should not be treated this way and starved out of Gaza. And if I might add, that's against international humanitarian law. Starving people out in conflict is a war crime.
Is Israel committing a war crime in your view?
The Netanyahu government has atrociously managed this. It has been responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians through its inability to distinguish between combatant and civilian, which goes against international humanitarian law.
Are you saying it's a war crime?
And it should be held to account. Starvation is a war crime.
Just a couple of other issues domestically. Do you still think a company tax cut should be looked at?
So my argument has been that we need to have a growth agenda. I think we've done some great work in terms of helping average Australian workers get ahead. We need to fuel growth into the future. That's why I've been so focused on technology. I think having that growth agenda for the long term is crucial for the good of the nation, and we should consider a wide range of options.
Including
more
company tax?
More than anything else, let me stress this, more than anything else, we need to burn through the timidity that has shackled us in the first term. We are going to need to make big changes in a world that is changing fast to ensure that the country stands on its own 2 feet. Very important. And there should be a number of things considered. And I wasn't just talking about company tax, David. I also stressed the need for investment allowances to renew machinery, to see CapEx grow, have a productivity burst as well, because it's
So
good
we should look at all of those things.
It's good for to have strong businesses, great jobs, a strong economy that's well fueled into the future.
And when it comes to your portfolio, whether it's tech, AI, quantum computing. You are seen as one of the few in the government who's passionate about it and gets it. Are there others in cabinet who do understand the challenges, the opportunities, the role of government in these areas?
I took the more than 10 years getting my head around the complexity of technology, talking with people, listening, learning. Artificial intelligence, I've been talking about that well before anyone was thinking about the implications of ChatGPT. It takes time to do that, and I'm probably a person most well versed in the government around that. Who takes up those reins is up to the PM, but I certainly believe that technology will fuel a growth agenda, and the race is on for countries to get their head around it, and that's why I thought some of the things that we took in the first term of this government set us up for the long term as well.
Will we see you back on the front bench?
Well, I'll be working towards that, absolutely. I have a contribution to make. I want to keep making it, and I'll do it from the backbench. And I've got to say, I've walked political deserts before. All I hope for at the end is you might have a bottle of water for me when I emerge.
I've got a glass of water for you, right?
Well done.
Ed Husic, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good on you.
All right, well, we're going to get to the coalition leadership, what's happening for the Liberal leadership, the Nationals leadership. We'll talk about the Greens leadership as well. It's all in play at the moment, but there's a bit to talk about after that interview. And let's get back to the panel. Phil Curry, Mel Clark, Peter Harcher. Phil, Ed Husic didn't miss Richard Marles there at all.
No, not a statesman, a factional assassin.
Wasn't so much as a left-right combo, but a left-right, left-right, left-right. Keep them coming.
Yeah, so I think, speaks for itself, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know what I can add. And the government first term shackled by timidity.
Yeah. Does this
interesting meeting tomorrow morning?
It will be an interesting meeting tomorrow morning. Does this, Mel, indicate there are going to be ongoing internal issues there and pressure on Richard Marles?
There will, and as much as there might have been moves to try and help shore up his future leadership prospects, events like this can linger in memories for a long time. I think it's also worth highlighting some important comments from Ed Husic there about the need to be able to speak up. We know that caucus has become something of a rubber stamp when so many of the decisions are made at a different level, be that at cabinet level or be that at factional level. That Ed Husic is going to stay on and continue to speak. I think while it might be painful for the government, it will be good for them to have someone who can speak in an unshackled way, particularly when we consider that one of the other senior members of the Labor Party who was willing to speak up was Mark Dreyfus. I mean, if we just need to think about the mandatory sentencing provision that was added into some of the anti-Semitism laws that were rushed through. Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus have been among those who have been willing to have those debates in caucus, push back even when it seems like the fix is on. The fact that he's going to stick around and do that might be uncomfortable, but will probably ultimately be a good thing for the Labor Party.
Anne Ali will go up into Cabinet and become the first female Muslim member of Cabinet. What role, we don't know. Who becomes Attorney General, most likely, I understand, either Murray Watt or Michelle Rowland. We'll see. The Prime Minister has to allocate all the portfolios and he'll announce those tomorrow. I understand the swearing in on Tuesday. But that point, coming back to, I think the more substantive point Ed Husic's making there, Peter, is, as Mel says, the ability to have not just diversity, but a diversity of views and what that represents in the Cabinet.
Well, he was pretty cutting on that point, as he was on many others. But yeah, if you can't champion diversity and then have it sitting in the corner not saying anything, that's a pretty tough line. What we just saw from a very angry Ed Husic is actually a public insight into the Cabinet debates and arguments that have been going on for the last couple of years, where Ed Husic and Penny Wong had what I'm told were the most heated debates and arguments in the life of this government. Now, what's happened is that Ed Husic, now that he's a backbencher, is now free to make all those points that he just made to you, when and where he wants, and to criticise the government. So they've gone from having a contained argument, which Penny Wong largely won, now to having a very public argument that's going to dog this government as long as the Palestinian issue is raging, and looks like it's going to keep raging for quite a long time.
Let's move to some of the other parties. As I say, there's a bit going on. Let's start with well, Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, I want to start there because this sort of traverses the grievances in the National Party, but also now what's coming in the Liberal Party, given, as we mentioned earlier, she's put her hand up this morning, confirming she will be running for Deputy Liberal Leader. She's yet to set foot in the Liberal Party room, but is running for Deputy Leader. This has not gone down well amongst the Nationals. They're saying some pretty scathing things privately, but even publicly, they're not holding back.
It's like changing teams on the football field after the whistle has blown. It's not the sort of behaviour I think Australians appreciate.
That is not the behaviour of partners, of trusted partners.
You know, there's a lack of loyalty there.
Yeah, lack of loyalty. Tell us what you really think. Mel, it was pretty clear across the board. The Nats are very unhappy about this. Why has Jacinta Price jumped ship?
Personal ambition. It's ultimately what it comes down to. She sees her future and the best chance of her growth in a political power as being with the Liberal Party. Surprising it hadn't happened earlier. There was always going to be a limitation to how far she could go sitting in with the Nationals. You know, for those who don't know, she's a country Liberal Party representative, a joint Conservative Party in the NT. Sat with the Nationals, a long bit of history behind there, but could have sat with either, chose to sat with the Nationals, was given some concessions by Peter Dutton, given opportunities to promote beyond what the Nationals would have normally been allowed. So her ambition was fuelled even beyond the bounds of what would normally be possible sitting with the Nationals. But to go further, she had to go to the Liberals and made a very poor choice to do that in the days after being elected on a National Party ticket. If there's a way to manage to...
Yeah, this has been one of the complaints of the Nats. They campaigned for her, they spent money trying to help her get elected, and...
No one likes a turncoat in politics. I think that's something that is universal across the party.
Is it a little different when you're from the CLP, to explain to people in the Northern Territory where she's from, it's a merged country Liberal Party, and you can technically choose to sit in either the Nats or the Libs party room?
Yeah, but I think the CLP seat has been sat with the Nationals since 1980, and there is a constitutional issue that seems to be written roughshod over. Remember Ian McFarlane Mackie tried to switch to the Nats to sort of prolong his career, but he was a member of the Liberal National Party in Queensland, and they apportioned Liberal National numbers in Canberra, and he was blocked by his party's constitution. I think someone told me Jacinta just whatever, just made the call unilaterally.
If there was an ideological reason for doing so, like a policy basis for doing so, then maybe there'd be a little more sympathy for her, but there's not. It's because it's a bid for a leadership position.
But look, it's clear it's about ambition. You can't be Prime Minister in the National Party. It's an extraordinary thing. She's been in 3 years. We were talking about Sam Ray earlier. We're talking about people in a hurry. She's been in 3 years. She's had an extraordinary 3 years. You know, she was lionised by the Conservative movement because of her role in The Voice. Peter Dutton broke his own rule about not promoting first-termers into the ministry, let alone the cabinet, and gave her a cabinet role. He gave her that Doge position, how long, 6 months out. She didn't really do anything with it. I don't think it was a single policy. And now she's going to be Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party. I do worry or wonder whether it's all going a little bit quickly. And I mean, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, it's like a pastoral care position almost. You know, if you're the deputy, everyone comes to you to whinge. You know, you funnel intelligence to the leader and back. You manage internal disputes, in those sorts of things. It's a position that requires a bit of sort of experience and gravity. For this young woman to come in with no cultural experience of the party, with 3 whole years in Parliament, never been in a government, let alone a ministry.
She does have.
It's a big ask.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
She does have a lot of appeal with the base membership of the Liberal Party. She's of course shot to fame over The Voice, opposing that, but also things like saying there's no ongoing negative impacts of colonisation on Indigenous Australians. She wants abortion debated at the national level. And limits put on that. School curriculum she wants overhauled. These issues are the sorts of issues, Peter, I suppose, that she wants to pursue as a Liberal now?
Well, if she's consistent, then yes, she will. She's firmly from the Gina Rinehart branch of the National Party. And, you know, she had a taste of the big time with The Voice and now wants to continue in the Liberal Party. But it's like going from a small but sturdy rowing boat, which is the National Party, and now she's swum across to the ocean liner, but it's the Titanic. The problem is the ocean liner is the Titanic. It has been big It has been slowly sinking since the last election and now again sunk further at this election. And without structural reform of its divisions in particular, so that it can actually pre-select women, moderates, people who can connect with the electorate.
So let's look at it.
It's a very short-term move. It's designed to bolster. I don't know.
Well, it clearly is now a ticket with Angus Taylor.
Yeah.
Let's look at how the two of them are lining up. In fact, we've got a pitch from both of them over the last couple of days. Here was Sussan Lee talking about wanting to represent modern Australia.
We do need to reflect a modern Liberal Party meeting modern Australians in every single walk of life across the country. I think my appointment would send a strong signal to the women of Australia, but it's about much more than that. It is about the policy offering. It is about what modern Australia expects of us as Liberals.
The word modern getting a big workout from Sussan Lee. Angus Taylor, the big word he's using is bold. Bold on policy.
We need big, bold policy ideas on housing, energy, cost of living, national defence, and we need to match them with a party that's fit to win. Bringing in new talent, especially more women.
Had a big, bold policy on energy, didn't
Well,
I don't want to be rude, but Senator Price, well, still Senator Price, whether inadvertent or not, was associated with the whole Trump thing, the MAGA thing. She said, "Make Australia get great again." And I just wonder about the immediate imagery of, everyone said one of the problems with Dutton's campaign was
too Trumpy.
Too Trumpy. So the immediate response is add more Trump. It's very confusing.
Part of the curious thing in this contest is if you're Angus Taylor, the people who might be swayed by bringing over Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, were they really going to vote for Sussan Lee anyway?
Well,
I'm
that's
not
a good
sure
point.
if
So
it
I've spoken to
helps
some
with
in the
the
Libs who, it's a tight contest right now, but there are some in the middle who are undecided. And I have spoken to some who are leaning now more towards Sussan Lee because they don't like the direction of an Angus Taylor, Jacinta Price ticket. But it's still close.
She's a vote winner. Like Conservative voters love her. She's very popular.
But the voters they've lost going to come back to the Liberals.
I think part of the problem that we're seeing, and you see that in those videos there, is at the moment it's a leadership contest between different adjectives about how they'll approach. There's a lot of motherhood statements. There's not actually anyone there saying, our problem is we had a nuclear policy and that's damaging our climate credentials and that's why we're not getting votes. Or conversely, we didn't go hard enough with nuclear. This is the only way we can see forward. Like, no one's actually presenting a position. Exactly. There's no debate here. It's just a fight over adjectives.
We would say this, but neither of them done a press conference, which used to happen, where you could actually take questions and explain what you want to do with the leadership. Does gender matter here too, Mel? Because they overlooked Julie Bishop. Women have deserted them since then. If they overlook Sussan Lee at this point, what message will that send?
It's certainly an issue for them, and if they want to try and win back the voters that they have lost in their old heartland areas, if they want to accept that that's something they need to do, then it is an issue. But a lot of the party is convinced that's not the problem and they don't want to go there. And others are concerned that Sussan Lee, they don't feel, is necessarily the right person to do that task. They don't think she's necessarily the best advocate for strong women, but there are so few women left in the Liberal Party that there's not a lot of other choices.
The time's going to get us here. How does this look, this contest on the Libs? Who's going to win it, do you think?
Well, if they're smart, they'll give it to Sussan Lee, because although Lee and Angus Taylor both represent parts of the problem that we've just seen with the opposition, at least Sussan Lee is, as you say, a female face that will show perhaps that the party is capable of talking to women and identifying with women. But, I mean, we talked about some of the side effects of the factional system in Labor. This is essentially boiling down to a factional contest.
Versus Conservative.
Angus represents the Conservatives. Sussan represents the moderates. If the party has any wisdom beyond its factionalism, it will back the woman.
Just quickly on the Nats, on the Nationals, David Littleproud facing a challenge from Matt Canavan, even though he's in the Senate. He's, based on my conversations, doing better than perhaps some expected, but David Littleproud still expected to win this.
Yeah, Canavan not expected to win, but running to send a message. I mean,
the message being net zero.
We're unhappy too. Yeah. I mean, the National Party can sort of hold its head high. The last two elections, the Liberal Party has lost more than 30 seats. 35. Morrison had 77 seats. The coalition in 2019, they're now down to 40 something. The Nats haven't lost any of those. I think maybe Claire went to an independent. yet they're going to knock off, or they're out to get their leader too. They're unhappy too, and yeah, it's this net zero thing.
Well, he's putting a stake in the ground on net zero.
Yeah, and he's got support from fellow. Canavan's got support from fellow Queenslanders. Tony Blair said recently net zero is not going to happen, and so it's just more.
It's going to be an ongoing issue.
But that's this move by the National, and this Matt Canavan's move will keep the support for nuclear alive within the Nationals, and that will make it more complicated for the Liberals when the moderates are pointing out the nuclear policy was part of the reason that many voters don't take us seriously on climate change, because they know it's not a serious policy to address climate change, and whether or not some of the Conservatives like it, that's what a fair chunk of the voting public wants to see.
And the Greens, just quickly, we need a I don't know why.
What are the Teals?
The Greens, Adam Bant loses his seat. It's a bit of a three-way contest. Sarah Hanson-Young, Maureen Faruqi, Larissa Waters. Maybe they end up with co-leaders here. The Greens, Peter, don't often do leadership challenges.
Well, they've had co-leaders in the past. They had two. Why not have three? It's interesting that Sarah Hanson-Young, the woman who brought the dead fish, the big salmon into the Senate, now represents the sanest and most moderate option, apparently, within the party. But
I think Larissa Waters is seen as someone who can draw in a wide spectrum.
And Larissa is a centrist in the Greens spectrum.
Whereas Maureen Faruqi, you're saying that would continue the more.
I think that would continue the more fractious and extreme end of the argument for which the Greens have been punished. The fact that we're talking about the leadership of all the other parties is also an attestation to the success that Labor has had in cementing itself so firmly at the centre. It's forcing everybody else out.
We talk about the history of election wins and the vote that Labor got, but the outcome here in knocking off the leaders of the opposing parties makes this such an historic.
It's matter. We're talking about who's going to be the leader of the Liberal Party. I mean, it doesn't really matter ultimately. I mean, well, it does, but in terms of I can't remember a time where the opposition is mathematically incapable of winning the next election. That's how extensive the damage has become. And the Greens have been, just destroyed. Even the Teal movement sort of lost a seat. So you shouldn't underestimate what Albanese's done here.
The fallout is
Ed Husic or not, it's a pretty big result.
Indeed. All right, our panel, Peter Harcher, Melissa Clark, Phil Curry, will be back very shortly with some final observations. Time now for Mike Bowers and Talking Pictures.
I'm photographer Mike Bowers. I'm talking pictures this morning with columnist for The Australian, the one and only Jack the Insider. And mate, welcome back to the Mate Media.
Welcome to the 48th Parliament.
48th Parliament.
48th Parliament, here we are.
Jack, this week post-election analysis is all a go and the cartoonists have been drawing their own conclusions, and why not?
Oh, that's right, yes. They've had a bit of fun, haven't they?
They have. Harry Bruce from the Cairns Post has got the train wreck that is the coalition mid-wreck.
Well, Cairns, the seat of Leichhardt. They've just elected Matt Smith. He's 6'11", Mike.
That wasn't on my bingo card. Someone bigger than Dan Repiccioli will get elected.
I know. Politics aside, Labor's basketball team is going to be unbeatable.
Trump, One Nation deal.
Culture wars, job cuts, nuclear.
And there it is, heading off the track.
Bit of coal hanging out of the train too.
Back on track. I love this, Warren. They've got the smoke coming out of the Liberal Party.
Smoke? Have they selected a new leader? Nope, the joint's still
on fire.
That's why you've got black smoke.
What did you think of Jacinta switching parties?
The Nats have gone down in the Senate to 4, which means they'll lose major party status. They are absolutely filthy.
Matt Golding cartoon. I believe the Liberal Party's my other natural home.
Bit of Marga reference there.
Yes. Brett Lethbridge's got the trophies on the wall of Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton and Adam Bant and Tanya Plibersek.
Tanya Plibersek. She shouldn't be on the wall.
She shouldn't be on the wall.
Yes, it's a little bit like the final scene in The Godfather there. Today I take care of I settle all family business.
Beautiful Megan Herbert, who's got the Labor broom sweeping out, the MAGA hat, the Greens toothbrush, the trumpet of whatever it was called. And
the crumpet of apricots.
Trumpet of apricots and nuclear power.
So I would have gone for the mopping of the floor, but anyway, the broom will do the job.
Mark Knight has drawn Peter Dutton at one of the multiple times he appeared at the petrol stations. I think 17 was the number, but goodness knows what he put in that car, but it seems to have detonated the Liberal jalopy.
What was in that fuel? And he's given him a big wave too. See you later.
Dean Alston, he solved Peter's work from home problem. So what now, Mr Dutton?
I'll be working from home.
I thought Johannes picked it beautifully. It wasn't quite the nuclear energy that they had anticipated.
Yes, there is a thermonuclear explosion going on there at LNP HQ. We're obviously referencing the nuclear policy, which was just terrific. And it's a shame we didn't embrace it, but it was very hard to do so because it was really little more than a thought bubble.
Incomparable David Rowe, beautifully channeling Rembrandt's anatomy lesson.
Yes.
The last political anatomy lesson of Anthony Green. We've got Angus Taylor, Sussan Lee, Dan Tehan, Andrew Hastie, Jane Hume, Little Proud and Mackenzie, looking at the entrails of a loss.
Yeah, and they'll be looking at them for some time.
Kathy Wilcox, how can you people be so out of touch, says Gina in her ivory tower.
Yes, whatever Gina says,
yep.
Do the opposite. Do the opposite, you should be all right.
Teenage mutant Ninja Albo, valiantly trying to resist...
remain humble.
The middle of the road mutant ninja tortoise.
Yes, yes. The Greens are fairly unhappy that he gave Max Chandler Mather a bit of a backhander on the way out.
Matt Golding has been on fire for the entire election campaign, and he continues, respect my authority.
Authority, it is. Which is Albo as Eric.
Yeah, Albo Cartman.
Second term PM, he's even got the badge.
I did love this, Mark Knight.
It's just really cruel.
Well, sometimes, Jack, the sun doesn't shine and then the wind doesn't blow, and the Greens don't green.
He hasn't even got any.
No power.
Got any LPs? He hasn't got any discs out there. Yeah, looking a bit sad there. Poor old Adam, out of power.
Politics is a brutal game.
It is a blood sport, and the winners are grinners and the losers can suit themselves, Mike.
Thanks very much for unpicking events of the post-election week.
My great pleasure, Mike. And it's back to you, Spearsy.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Mike. You certainly don't get weeks like that too often. And once again, a very happy Mother's Day to mine and all the mums out there. Have a great day. Peter.
Well, I want to pick up on the mums because in global politics we spend a lot of time, give a lot of attention to the people who are trying to repress, exploit and crush humanity. Well, let's give a bit of tribute and credit to the mums who create, nurture and build the loving hope of humanity. It's all due to mums.
Yeah.
Hard one to follow. I'm going to come back to the hard reality of numbers. Look, we've talked a lot about the extent of Labor's victory in the House. I think it's worth pointing out the extent of their victory in the Senate as well. It looks like they are going to pick up a seat at the expense of the coalition in every single mainland state. That means not only do they have more Senate seats than the coalition, which is unusual, they will have, combined with progressive seats on the crossbench, a clear progressive majority Senate to work with. And that could end up being as consequential as the victory in the lower house if the government wants to take advantage of it.
Good point. Phil?
Just Labor and the Greens, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm in the nice category with Peter. I'd just like to say thanks to the Australian Electoral Commission. They've just, we've had another election. 18 million people voted. They've counted these votes by hand. We haven't had one stuff up. No sniff of corruption. It's gone completely smoothly, and all the we tend to overlook how smoothly democracy runs in this country. And so, I think to the AEC and all those volunteers who put up with everyone on pre-poll booths yelling and screaming and carrying on like half-wits and the rest of it, and it's gone. No one's died. We've got to change the government. Everyone's accepted the result.
No, well said. We take it for granted far too often that they do an incredible job, and it's so valuable for our democracy. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning and cramming as much as we did in. Finally, there's an old rule with live TV that if someone's phone rings while you're on air, the offender has to buy a case of beer for the crew. I'm not sure if the same rule applies in Labor's caucus, but someone might be shouting a few drinks after this effort. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.
The Labor movement, with the business community, with... No one should leave their phone on in the prison. We haven't written off any held seat, and we'll wait and see what happens. You'd think ABC 24 and Sky would be covering this, but anyway. to the viewers at home, stop ringing. Thanks very much.
I myself feel very excited about being here.